Welcome back to the Business Simple podcast. I'm your host, James. I have a really exciting guest with me today. Matt owns MK2 Consulting. He's owned a number of businesses earlier. He has a really interesting story that I'm really excited to hear more about as well, as I actually don't know the whole thing in a super deep way. So that's going to be really exciting. It includes Delliote Fast 50 awards, property investment, running one of the cooler quantity surveying businesses that I've ever stumbled across, consulting, a whole bunch of awesome stuff. So I'm really excited to hear about it. Thanks heaps for coming.
No, thanks for having me, James.
Absolute pleasure. So if it's okay with you, let's start at the start, if that's all right. Where are you from? When did you get into business? Like all of that sort of stuff, if that's okay.
Yeah, cool. So look, I grew up in the Bay of Plenty in Tauranga. Really supportive family, but super poor. Growing up, it was a big family, no money to speak of. So everything that I had to do, I had to do myself, basically. Seemed to just have an entrepreneurial streak from early on, and I think a lot of it was probably just by default.
Yeah.
Like if I wanted something, I had to go and get it somehow. So I had to get creative.
Yeah.
So like right from when I was 15, and I needed a car to get around, so I couldn't afford a car.
Yeah.
So I found this car for like $50, and it had an engine in the boot. And so I taught myself how to put an engine together, put the engine in the front of the car, and for like $100, I had my first car.
Yeah.
Tickled that up and sold it, made some money, upgraded over time.
Yeah.
And so it just sort of evolved over the years, really.
Yeah.
So I started like that, and then I figured, hey, I can sort of buy and sell stuff,
Yeah.
So I started with vehicles because it was sort of something I taught myself.
Yeah.
So every few months I'd go and buy a car and I'd do it up and I'd sell it and I'd make some money. And then the NZTA got onto me because I was doing too many a year and I wasn't a dealer. So I started to have to put them in my brother's name and my mum's name. Just a kid just doing stuff. But it sort of set this basis really for entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
So I just hustling like that really. Put myself through uni.
Yeah.
Got a business studies degree, double major, went back, did some postgrad study as well, and then came out of uni and sort of looking at jobs, and it's like, man, this is dead end. Like for me, looking at salaries, I was like, this is totally capped.
Yeah. I
need to kind of do my own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd worked my way through uni at a bunch of different things, and so post uni, I sort of said, well, what really is going to make me the most amount of money in a quick time frame, and it was property. And this was sort of early 2000s in Auckland. The property boom was happening, and I'm like, well, how am I going to get a house in Auckland?
Mm-hmm.
So I looked a little bit outside the box, and I said, well, back in Tauranga, I can buy something for 130 grand.
Yeah.
So back then, 10% deposit. That's all I need. I just need to come up with 13k.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was making like $500 a car and flipping them. So I'm like, right, 26 cars. Yeah. So I set myself this goal, and I'm like, in 26 cars, I'm going to have a house deposit.
Yeah.
And so I did it. I just put my mind to it. Every week I'd get the auto trader, and I'd go and buy a car. A week later I'd sell it. So within a year, I'd put together this house deposit.
Yeah, cool.
And so I went down to Tauranga, bought this house in Tauranga, and the market was just going mental. 2 weeks later, the agent rang me and said, hey, do you want to sell that house you just bought? Hadn't done a thing to it, and it was like 30 grand.
Yeah, wow. Just when you work for a year to make 13,
and it was like within 2 weeks, just boom, and it was like sweet. So I got my 13, I got my 30.
Yeah.
I've now got enough for an Auckland place, and so so we bought like a little tiny unit in Auckland, and my wife, God bless her, we'd buy these shitty houses, and we'd have to move into them. We couldn't afford to live somewhere else as well as do it.
Yeah.
So we'd live in it, we'd strip it, everything was dusty, we'd do it up, taught myself how to paint and plaster and tile and do all that stuff. And like the house would be magic for like a week when it was all finished and staged, and then it would sell and on to the next one.
Back to another one.
Yeah, so we sort of did 4 a year.
Mm-hmm.
That was our goal every 3 months. And just sort of built up. And sort of built a decent bit of equity that way. And then, the crash happened. 2008, and we got stung.
Yeah.
Like we got caught in that pretty bad, and so I was like, okay, we need to do something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I know property, I know doing this, and so started a renovation company.
Cool.
And we grew that for a couple of years, and sold it. And that was sort of what got me into, oh man, selling businesses is actually really like a cool thing to do. So, did like the next one I did was like a landscaping company.
Mm-hmm.
And just through all this, I learned a bunch of business principles. I learned, what makes a really good business and what makes a business saleable as well, and there's some sort of just I guess, common basic rules about what you can do to sell a business and how you structure that business to be saleable.
Yeah.
And if you do that right from day one, you're pretty much guaranteed a good result.
Yeah, right. Do you mind, just because I'm curious, what are the rules?
Well, so it depends on the type of business.
Yeah.
So some businesses, it's about having assets.
Yeah.
Right? So you build up physical assets, and that's the value of the business that sits in the physical assets. For other businesses, it's recurring revenue. Yeah. So you've got to build something that's a secure recurring revenue. So contracted recurring revenue, not just a bunch of clients that pay you because they can disappear in a day, but some sort of contract that has recurring revenue. And then ideally something that is asset-based and those assets produce recurring revenue. So when a buyer comes in, they're buying something physical because they want to get something for their money, not just a service-based entity. And there's got to be some assurance around that money. And the other thing is you kind of have to make yourself redundant. So as the owner of the business, you can't be important. So that business has to go just as well without you as with you, which is really, that's the hardest part because you're the guy that's put all the effort into this, right? And you're the front of it, you're the motivating force, you're the driver, whatever. So how do you make yourself redundant? And so if you can do that from day one and you go, my goal in 5 years or 3 years is to sell this business, then you really need to make yourself redundant from day one and set roles and set processes and set systems in place so that you're not required. Because one of the biggest roadblocks to someone coming in to buy a business is to say, well, James, you're the face of this thing. What is it without you? It's nothing. So the value starts going down. Whereas if James isn't important to this business and the new guy can just come in or the new girl can come in and step into your shoes, there's some value in that. Really sound books is a big one. So right from day one, just super transparent, squeaky clean books. They show good metrics. So they show good gross profit. They show low overheads. They show all of the things that a good business should show. They should track a sustainable growth curve as well. So you don't want to see something that's going like that in year one and then down and then flat. You want to see a nice gradual curve. And the other thing as well is you've got to have a sound foundation. So it's really easy to fake a business for a few years. Like really easy to just fudge through it with some effort or some clients that just hang on for a little bit, but they're not going to be there forever. So a sound foundation where the clients that you've got are actually going to stay even after you leave. They're good, They're not like you struggle to get money out of them for the first couple of years, but you know that they're going to fall off. So sound foundation. And if you can do all of those things, then you've got a saleable business.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Nice. And so you've obviously been through this process a number of times. I'm assuming you've learnt some of these things based on doing it wrong or how's...
Absolutely, man. Yeah, absolutely. Like all of this stuff is a culmination of mistakes. Just many mistakes. Doing it wrong. A culmination of never... stopping to learn as well. So seeking out people that know way more than you, rather than just giving it a crack and failing, which is not bad, but actually saying, hey, I need to get some advice on this. So seeking out someone that's sold a few businesses, seeking out some agents that know their stuff when it comes to selling a business, and say to them, okay, mate, I've got this thing today. I want to come and see you in 3 or 4 years' time and put this thing on the market and get maximum dollars for it. What do I need to do? What is the structure? What do your buyers want to see? How do I need to have this thing presented?
Yeah.
What do my clients need to look like? What do my numbers need to look like? And then understand that and structure your business to get it to that point.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's cool. And so, this is something that I'm really fascinated in. The Delliote Fast 50 piece. So what business was it that you owned at the time that won that?
Yeah, so I had a company called Cube.
Yeah.
And so it started out as a project management firm. Mm-hmm. Just me as a contract PM. That was what it was. It was just Cube projects, me as a PM. And most of my clients were actually insurance companies. So I was doing a lot of assessment work for insurance companies. And the one thing that really helped that business was the Christchurch earthquake event.
Yeah.
So I was pretty well known with a number of the insurance companies before the earthquakes. And once the earthquakes happened, I was like, man, I got to go all in here. This is such a massive opportunity. So I went to all of them and I said, hey, I will do whatever it takes to service your needs.
Yeah.
What do you need to scale the shit out of this thing? And I'll do it. Mm-hmm. And they said to me, hey, look, if you do this, we'll give you that. And that's basically what we did. And so we just scaled up, man, like overnight. I think it was crazy. It was a crazy time. Within 7 days, yep. I put ads on Trade Me and Seek, and I went to recruitment agencies, and within 7 days, it went from just me to 32 project managers. My wife and I worked like round the clock for like 7 days. We went and bought 32 computers, 32 laptops, 32 phones. She set them all up. Like, we got the guys in, we trained them, we had them on planes, we had rental cars arranged. It was insane. And then from there, basically, we were out assessing insurance damage for these insurance companies. And I just focused on doing everything right, like absolutely right. I sat down with the insurers and I said, what are your metrics? What are your SLAs? What are your KPIs? And I focused, we met them and we exceeded them every single time. Then I went back to them and I said, hey, this is what we're doing for you with 32 guys. What would happen if we had 60 guys? What would happen if we had 90 guys? And they're like, man, you've proven yourself. We love what you're doing. Do it. And so we did. And we scaled again. Yeah. And it just went like that. And then, so that was like mad for like a year.
Yeah.
Crazy.
I know I would define my business's growth to have been quite fast. Like when you look at us compared to say like median pace, quite quick.
We went from like maybe 10 grand a week, so 40 grand a month, to $1 million a month in 3 months. It was just insane.
How do you hang on?
So you don't sleep.
Yeah.
But what you do is you put structure around it, because this stuff falls over without structure.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, I'm going to need a health and safety person.
Yeah.
I'm going to need a general manager. I'm going to need a human resource person to manage all these people.
Yeah.
Like, there's questions. I'm going to need an office admin to do nothing but flight and accommodation and hotel bookings. I'm going to need this. I'm going to need that. And so my job really was just moving these pieces around, going, who needs to look after what? What systems do we put in place to make it work? What cross-checks do we have to make sure that it doesn't fail?
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was awesome. A little side note on that, it nearly tipped us over. Because,
I'm not surprised.
Because the problem with some of these insurers, especially the Australian ones, like the Kiwi insurers were fine. They would pay us like 20th of the following, no drama.
Yeah.
But the Australian insurers were like the 30th of the month following the month of invoice. Yeah, and then they'd be 60 days late on that.
Yeah.
And so at one point, they were just like super late, man. And they were like, owed us 600 grand or something. Yeah. And we were paying our guys every week. Yeah. Like, they had to be, the airline had to be paid and the hotel had to be paid. So we were like, 500 grand out. Yeah. 600 grand due, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And the bank was really good. They gave us some bridging stuff, but it got to a point where it was like 900K.
Yeah.
And we're just like, man, we just can't get money out of these guys. We know they're good for it. We know they're going to pay.
Yeah.
Just,
when they choose.
Yeah. So I was like, max out this credit card, max out this overdraft, borrow some money from my mum, just to try and hold the machine together.
Yeah.
And I think we got within 3 days.
Yeah, right.
Of in 3 days, we're done. This thing's fallen over. And sort of no one knew except my wife and I.
Yeah.
Because everyone was getting paid. Like, there was we weren't defaulting or anything.
Yeah.
But we were like, and this check came through for like 890,000 or something. I remember seeing it hit the bank account. I was like, oh, God, we're sweet. Because the margin in it was so good that just one payment like that was sweet for the next however long.
My like skin's tingling.
So,
like I didn't know any of this.
Yeah. It was crazy, man. And anyway, so the insurance piece was awesome.
Yeah.
Tons of money in it, but the moving parts were just ridiculous. Like absolutely ridiculous. I don't even know how we did it. But anyway, at the end of the assessment piece, the insurer came and said, "Hey, look, we're running a repair program. And you've done an amazing job on the assessment piece. Do you want to do the repairs?" And I'm like, I don't know if I really want to do construction. But we're talking just huge money.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking 2,500 repair jobs.
Yeah.
That's on the table, which is, we don't have to go looking. They're just giving them to us. And so I was like, yeah, okay, sweet. So we set up. And we set up in Christchurch. We had an office here. We had an office in Kaikoura, and we had an office in Blenheim. Yeah. And we serviced those three regions. Basically set up a managed repair program. So again, just overnight, like it was like, okay, we're doing this. So got on a plane, went and shook hands, set up contractors all through Kaikoura, all through Blenheim, all through Christchurch, hired a bunch of staff that were in-house as well. Decided how we're going to do this. You know, we can't hire enough people, so we're going to have to contract it. Who's going to look after them? How do we do that? What are the payment terms? Where's the liabilities? You know, we're going to have people running these. What sort of PMs do we need to do it? And over the course of, maybe 2 or 3 weeks, we bolted that piece together. And then, that was to get rolling. And then over the course of, the next year, we refined it really well. And we did that it probably started, like 2017, I think. And that went until it all ran out.
Right.
Yeah. And then when it started to wind up, I sort of said, well, we're in this space. We're doing well. We've got great people. Like, we had some amazing people. Our admin ladies were just incredible. We had a general manager who was amazing. She was just, to this day, I think she's the most amazing person, and they just held it all together. So we said, we've got this machine, it's working. We've got project managers, we've got people, we've got good contractors, we've got stuff. And that's when we said, all right, let's do something a bit different. Because I was a bit jaded by the industry by this point. It was just horrible.
I'm not surprised. Yeah.
So I was like, man, we've got to do something different.
Yeah.
We've got to do something cool. We've got to do something different. Let's do off-site manufactured housing. So we're going to build it in a factory. We're going to get rid of all the delays. We're going to have really smart design. So wastage like less than 3%, and we're going to knock these things out in like a month. It shouldn't take 18 weeks to build a house. It can be done in 5, because if you get rid of all the delays, and when this guy's finished, this guy comes in like 1 minute later, not a week later, you can compress that time frame. So that's what we did. So we created some cool designs for these tiny houses, like 1-2 bedroom type things, all transportable, built in a factory, shipped out, plopped on your site. And our difference was we were fully compliant. So all consented, legit, live in it. Ready to go. We bought a section up the hill, and we built a 1-bedroom show home up there, amazing views, all this cool stuff. And we kept the same name, so it was still Cube, but it was Cube Living. Mm-hmm. And that's what we sort of transitioned into once the insurance stuff died out. So it was a combination of all of that. And at the time, we had an accountant, pretty hopeless. So once we started getting into that bigger sort of space, we moved across to Delliote, and our accountant at Delliote, she's amazing. We're still with her today. She's awesome. Said to us, man, you guys have been going hard for like a few years. Your growth curve might get you on this thing. You should apply for it. Yeah. I think back 2018, 2019, something like that, we applied for it, and we got on the Fast 50. Yeah, we were ninth.
Ninth, yeah. Amazing.
Ninth. So, in a way, like as a business award, all it does is it doesn't say how good you are at business. It just says how good you are at managing growth.
Yeah,
Because in order to, the way their metrics work is it's growth year on year on year on year over 5 years. So they look at a 5-year snapshot, and you've basically got to have a percentage growth every year over those 5 years. And whoever's percentage over those 5 years in aggregate is greatest is who wins. So we were 691% over that 5-year period.
Yeah.
And so in aggregate, that's put us at ninth on the Fast 50, which it was awesome, man. Like it was cool. We had an awards in Canterbury. They flew us to Auckland for this fancy vineyard evening, and it was it was really cool.
So there's a couple of things, and I know that I'm already off plan, but there's a couple of things that came up when you were just talking that you sort of brushed over, but would have been really hard, like really hard. One is, and I have a story on a scaled down version that you kind of touched on a little bit, is the big company withholding payments, almost pop thing, which I've experienced before as well. I had a big developer up in Auckland, and it was a considerably lower amount of money. I think it was about 45 or 50 grand that was withheld by no critique of work. Like they were like, we love the work, we're just trying to get this approved by head office to actually process the payment, and then 60 days later on the 30th, and it's all of a sudden you're like, and I probably only had 2 staff at the time or something, but I might have been doing 50 grand a month or 60 grand a month at the time. So it's like a lot of money. But the other one that you touched on was putting the people in the right places really fast to offset the things that you couldn't get to, and doing that well, because that's hard. I'm going through that process at the moment. That's a really challenging thing to do. What did you learn dropping an HR person, a general manager, a thing like that in at that rate?
So to touch on that first piece, the number doesn't matter. It's all relative, right? It's relative to ins and outs. So if you're a small guy, let's say you're a small one-man band painter, and you're turning over $1,000 a week. Yeah. And some dick withholds $3,000 on a job for you. That's huge, right? Massive. So I always went into things with the view, can I pay everyone downstream? So I'm engaging staff, I'm engaging contractors, I'm engaging everyone else. How am I going to pay them if I don't get paid? So I always had a plan. This one just went longer than I ever imagined it would, because I had payment terms set up, and my plan accounted for those payment terms, but not them going 2 or 3 times over it. So I always say to people, look, you've got to have a plan. You've got to assume that things will go wrong. You've got to assume that someone will default, or they're going to be late, or whatever. So in my mind, you've got to pay everyone else. So that painter, he's got to go and pay Dulux, Regime, whatever. He's got to go and pay his fuel bill. He's got to go and pay his staff. He's got to pay everyone else and accept that he's carrying that before he gets paid. And that's, to me, that's why you make profit. You're taking that risk to make the profit, right? So, I'd say to anyone in business, before you go into any deal, you've got to make sure you can carry. And then if you can't carry, you've got to have a plan.
Because that's an interesting thing to touch on, is I really don't support, and every now and again there's a situation where it's super dramatic and you've just got to be transparent with people around you, but I think you have a responsibility to ensure that it doesn't get passed on. And that's the thing I really agree with, is we have something withheld from us or something come through later, whatever. We would never want to operate in a way where one of our contractors gets paid late, because then we know it just continues on.
Well, you don't go to your staff and say, hey, no one's getting paid this week till we get paid. So absolutely plan for that kind of thing. In terms of the other stuff, I guess I learnt early on that you can't do everything, and one of my rules, hard and fast rules of business, is out in the world there's a lot of people better than me. And my job is to go and seek them out. So I'm not the greatest HR, I'm not particularly good with people, but I can go and find a great HR person and put them in that right spot and nurture them to do the stuff the right way. I can go and find a great finance person and put them in the right spot and nurture them and do that. And the reality is, if you rely on yourself, you can't scale. Because you can't do everything. You just can't do everything, and you can't have the skills to do everything as well. So it became really important for me early on. I tried doing everything. It was just silly. it became really important that my job really was just the coach.
Yeah.
I was just the coach, and and we had this thing. It was huge within our office. We even had it on the wall. We're a team of A players.
Yeah.
And A players was like the thing, right? We only hired A players. All our performance appraisals were based on making sure you stay an A player.
Yeah.
If you fall to be a B player, we've got a real problem.
Yeah.
We need to support you, get you back up. So it was just about that. And
Yeah.
every single role, right down, like our guy that swept the floors, we had a cleaner. We had this dude that did nothing but drive around and clean sites, and he was the best cleaner.
Yeah.
We paid him really, really well. We
Yeah.
gave him a nice van because that's what he wanted. And, but he did an awesome job. He was the best cleaner. And that was sort of how I wanted to structure it. That the whole way through the business was like the best people in those roles.
How cool is that?
Oh, it was epic.
And this is, I mean, I have a dramatically different setup now, but probably up until the start of this year, I was still guilty of that, and I still am today, not having released as much stuff as I should have. But I would have grown Digital Simple 90% of the way that it is, like to the point that it is now, doing essentially everything. Like had people doing some delivery stuff, but like making every call, doing everything, like overseeing everything. And it hasn't been until I've found people that I trust to do stuff, and I've let go a little bit, that we've actually been even in a position to go past that. Like I found an actual roof that we just couldn't push through, and it was considerably higher than I thought it would be doing everything by myself. Like we got bigger than I thought, but since letting go a little bit and now realizing the way that we get bigger again is by me letting go more, not by me controlling more.
Yeah. That
is a really hard thing to get you. I'm quite control freaky, and
Totally. And it's funny because it's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Because you're sort of like, this is my business. I know best. I've got to do all these things to make sure that it's right. But by doing that, you're limiting your growth.
Yeah.
If you put that same effort and that same focus into finding the right people to do those things better than you ever could, then your business is going to grow exponentially. And a lot of people, I think, as the business owner, they don't believe that there's other people that can do it better than them.
Yeah.
And that's a really limiting belief.
Yeah.
Because I'm quite happy to sit there and go, man, there's someone out there that can do everything better than me.
Yeah.
100%. I want to find them. I want them.
Yeah.
Because they're going to grow my business. Now, it's my job to wrap support around them, wrap structure around them, make sure that they stay on the right roadmap.
Yeah.
Because that's where the business needs to head. So I'm going to use you and make sure that you head in that direction and put the support around you so that you can execute those skills that are better than mine. And if we do that with all our team, man, we're going way more than I could do on my own.
I think that's my current chapter. As I think I crossed a piece where I realized I couldn't do everything, and I also realized that I wasn't as good at other people at doing stuff. And so I put people in place to do things, but my current chapter is now empowering them to do it. And that's been a big switch for me as I went through and I looked at my tasks and my responsibilities, and I was like, what's the most important one? And I was like, it's empowering and enabling my senior leadership team. There's nothing I could do that is more important in my day by day than that. And then I was like, oh my God, all of them, what's their most important task? It's empowering and enabling the people that sit below them, and it's about everyone getting better rather than everyone just trying to fix problems, which feels really good today, but it sucks in 6 months when you're still just fixing the same problems.
And the one caveat on that is you don't just give people that power and let them go, right? It's about having not controls, but about having processes in place to make sure that power that you're vesting into them is heading in the right direction all the time, and it doesn't veer off, and it doesn't go down a different path. And I think that's coming back in that circle to leadership. Then that's your role as a leader of the business, is to say, hey, I've found this great person. My job is to now lead them in the right direction and make sure that they stay on that path, doing all that right stuff.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. What a start to the episode. We haven't even caught up to modern day yet, and we're already away. So did you go landscaping company to Cube, and then Cube went to home?
No, I kind of had a gap in the middle, where after we sold that renovation company, I sort of was like, oh, man, I need a job, but I also want to do my own thing. So I I joined the ambulance service.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I trained as a paramedic. And part of the reason was, A, it was a little bit exciting.
Yeah.
Something a bit different. But we worked shift work, and we did 2 days on and then 2 nights on.
Yeah.
So I only worked 2 days at a time. And then I had a day off. Then I did 2 night shifts, but I could work during those days. So basically, and then we had 4 days off. So basically, I'd work 2 days, and then I'd have 6 days off.
Yeah.
And then I'd work 2 days and have 6 days off. And it was awesome because what I had is basically a full-time job during that other time. And so I got back into property.
Yeah.
And so, you know, whilst I was doing the ambulance thing and sort of growing a bit of a career in that space, I was flipping property again. So I'd come off shift, put my tool belt on, do a house, go back to work 6 days later. And it was an exciting time actually. But yeah, the ambulance is a really it's an interesting industry, man.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. So I was in Auckland at the time, and I was a senior station officer at Pitt Street, which is right downtown Auckland.
I used to live on Pitt Street.
Yeah, so you know the ambulance station there? Yeah. So that was my station. I worked out there for 10 years. And I don't know how I stayed there that long. Honestly,
how you fit all this
it went like that.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, when I left uni, I was only like 21.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So basically, into the ambulance at like 22, 23 type thing, and then had a solid 10 years in there. And by the end of that, man, I was burned. That was a brutal industry to be in. For everything, like for your mental health, your physical health, just everything. Yeah. It's a tough gig. Yeah. And then when I left the ambulance service, that's when I started Cube.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And Cube, so post Tiny Home, that was acquired, is that correct?
Yeah, so what happened in 2018, because I'm always looking ahead, right?
Yeah, you strike me as being.
I've got this thing where you've got to, in order to get places, I think you need to, like I've got some long-term stuff. So when I was really young, I was like, I don't want to work past 50.
Yeah.
It was actually 40, and I've adjusted it out because I had to. But so it was like, okay, so how am I going to stop work forever at 50? I'm going to need an income of X to be, comfortable, happy, whatever.
Yeah.
How am I going to generate an income of that by the time I'm 50? So you've got to put this like plan in place 20 years ago to get there. It doesn't happen overnight. So in 2018, 2017, I sort of took this long-term view of the construction industry. And I was like, where's it going? What's happening? Da-da-da-da-da. And even taking COVID out of the equation, it wasn't looking great, And funnily enough, a lot of the projections that we made back then have come to fore now in terms of material costs, in terms of consenting delays, in terms of all of these things that were putting pressures on the industry. So what we had, Cube was epic, man. And I set this up with a view to sale. Yeah. Because I had all this knowledge, right? So we built a bunch of rental units. So we had a whole lot of these units that were physical units that we had out on rent. Yeah. Physical assets. Yeah. Worth some money.
Recurring revenue.
Yeah. So when the business is valued, it's valued on the recurring revenue plus the cost of the physical assets. Absolute gold.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. Plus the cost of future sales that, were teed up. So I'm like, man, I gotta do something different. I gotta get out of this because it's not looking pretty. It's difficult. It's all of these things, and costs were going up. Like construction costs were rising, ridiculous, like 7.5% a month or something, just month on month.
Yeah, right. So that's almost 100% a year.
You can't pass that on to your client.
Yeah.
So, so we listed it, and it sold pretty quick because it was a great business.
Yeah. Assets, recurring revenue, contracts, future sales.
Even if you didn't build any more, you could live off the revenue of the rental units.
Yeah.
And the whole business made sense because, to give an example, like we could build a rental unit for 10 grand. Yeah. And it would rent for $100 a week. Yeah. So look at the ROI on that. Yeah. It's 50% on your money. Yeah. Paid off in 2 years, and then it's all gravy. Yeah. And the thing's got a 15, 20-year lifespan. Yeah. With a residual value at the end of it. Yeah. So it was an epic sort of setup. So great sale, great exit out of that. And what I did then is I just took a year off. Yeah. And I'm like, I need to make really sound decisions around where we go from here. So took a year off, bought a commercial building, spent that year doing it up as my own office for the future, and then over that year, sort of just tossed around a bunch of ideas, tried a few things, just sort of thought, where do we want to go, and that was when I set up MK2.
Yeah, cool. Nice.
Yeah.
And so, because that's obviously, I suppose there's a few, there's actually a million questions to ask for, and that's really cool. I feel, and this is probably one of the things I like most about getting to do this, is getting to learn these things about, like, how cool is it getting to sit down and hear someone's story like that? That's epic. It's really cool. Was there any part, just out of curiosity, because this is probably one of the most pressing for me, was there any part of what you learnt being in, like, working for St. John's or being in ambulance, that you took across to business that you found was really relevant, or did it sit sort of separately for you?
Yeah, really, really quite separate. It's, I think what it taught me was the world is really diverse. People are really diverse. And I think what it probably taught me was more personal stuff. Like, you never know what someone's going through.
Yeah.
So you might meet someone in the course of your business. You might sit down and have a meeting with a client, and they're really shitty, and you come away and you go, that guy's a dick.
Yeah.
But his wife might have died yesterday.
Yeah.
It just, you come across stuff like this all the time. And I think it also gives you just a different view on humanity as well. Makes you realise life's pretty short. You don't get too many second chances, all this kind of stuff, So if you're going to do something, you really want to do it right.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what I came away from it with.
Yeah, cool.
And also, it's just amazing what humans do to each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's terrible. Like, people are terrible.
What is that? I don't know why this is just this scene I remember from that movie Fury, and there's this bit where the guy's just arrived. It's like a World War II tank. I don't know if you've seen the movie, Tom Cruise and a whole bunch of other stuff, but this guy basically is just like shaking in a corner. He's like, wait until you see what a man can do to another man. Like, and it just stuck with me because being somewhat sheltered, like not growing up on a yacht or anything, but like being sheltered from that side of the world, you realise there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of bad people out there, there's a lot of that sort of stuff.
There really is.
Yeah.
There really is. And there's a lot of people that will do that stuff without even thinking twice. And no remorse, no regret, no, just bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny because, you spend, in the ambulance, you spend all day immersed in that.
Yeah.
But when you come out in the real world, I now spend all my time immersed away from that.
Yeah.
So I don't think about that. But when you're in that for 10 years and that's all you see, and that's all you think about, and that's all you're exposed to, it really skews your view of the world.
Yeah, right. And is that what you meant with that? Like, just hard on mental health, hard on that sort of thing?
Yeah, totally. You just get to a point where like all you see, and police are in exactly the same boat, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason that most police officers hate people.
Yeah.
Because all they see all day is shit.
Yeah.
They just deal with criminals.
Yeah.
They deal with people that lie to them. They deal with people that are violent. And that's their view of the world. And it was exactly the same. I got to a point where I'm like, man, this is my view of the world.
Yeah.
And this is really skewed. This is not necessarily balanced or right. Or, and I actually want some joy. I want some good stuff. I want, I just don't want to deal with this all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a great organisation to work for. There's not a lot of staff support and things like that. To give you, I could tell stories all day from the time there, but to give you an example of what you have to deal with, we went to a suicide. So a young girl, like literally young, 13 years old, went and sat down on a train track and waited till the train came and ran her over. And so we arrive, and part of the job is to pick up all the bits that are spread over 400 metres or something. A seagull's coming in, you're plucking bits away from a seagull. And you finish that, and you jump back in the ambulance, and you're like, geez, it'd be nice to go have a cup of tea and just decompress a little bit after that, Yeah. And it's like, no, next job's waiting, go. And you're just like that for 12, 14 hours at a time.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing. And after 10 years of it, it's too much. Some people can deal with it, I know guys that have been in that job 25 years.
Yeah.
And they're absolutely fine. Well-balanced humans, not a problem. They just have a way of dealing with it. For me, 10 years that was it.
I don't think I'd last 10 minutes.
No.
I don't, yeah. Yeah. Especially when you think, like, I think it's, there's that expression used before, which is like, it's all relative, right? But I think there is examples of stuff like that fall outside of that realm. Like, just because it's what you're used to doesn't mean it's something you can just handle all the time and not. That is serious. That's, there's stuff. And if anything, it's not even about going and having a cup of tea. It's like, you need like 2 weeks to try and get, and that's the way that it should be set up.
And the other thing too, I've probably got to take some responsibility as well, is that I used it as a second job. So for that period of time, I was working two jobs. So it was also, going, okay, something's got to give. I can't keep doing 2 jobs for this period of time. What would I rather do?
Yeah.
I'd rather do something for myself.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
So MK2, let's go to probably about there, if that's okay. So you transition from Cube to MK2, quantity surveying, business consulting. Is this just based off things you're learning through Cube? What's the kind of inspiration and the feel behind that?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things. I really enjoy quantity surveying. Like, numbers are my thing. Yep. I did all the QS work through Cube for the insurers. I oversaw the QS team. I went back and did some training and got my NZI QS letters, and to me it was a really good business model, in that you're not sort of caught up in the long term, so you're able to get in, do what you do, get out, get paid.
Yeah.
It's a great business model in that sense. And in terms of tying it into the business consulting, I just see so many businesses that have so much potential. And, in New Zealand, most business owners aren't actually business owners.
Yeah.
There's someone that knows how to do a thing, and so they've created a business to do that thing. And they do that thing really, really well. They don't do business well at all. And so I'd like to think I've got, enough experience, I've got a degree, I've got all the bits and bobs to back it up. And I really enjoy working with people on their business.
Yeah.
I love business. I love seeing businesses grow. I love seeing people thrive. And so it was just a sort of a hand-in-hand thing, going, hey, look, the QS thing pays the bills, the business consulting's the passion.
Yeah, nice.
And so let's combine them. Let's do them together.
And I know, Mike, who's been on this podcast, I know that I sent him your way, and he could not speak higher of what happens. And I know he loves the consulting stuff, but I think that probably just comes from it being the passion side of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, guys like Mike, I'm sure he won't mind me talking about him. He's amazing to work with because he's open-minded. A lot of business owners get stuck in the static because they're not prepared to do anything different. Yeah. I've done this for 5 years. Well, yeah, you have, and that's why you're staying where you are. Whereas he's someone that's happy to look at ideas, happy to throw stuff around, and if we throw something at the wall and it sticks, he's like, yeah, man, I'm doing that. Yeah. Let's go. And it's awesome. Yeah. And then he sees the growth that comes with that.
Yeah.
So it's really rewarding. And it's not. There's a lot of wins to be had in trade-based businesses. Yeah. Because most of those guys are technicians. They're not business owners. But I've got clients across all sorts of industries. Yeah. That we work on different things for, and it's really exciting.
Yeah. That was going to be my next question. Was from that business consultancy side of things, what are the biggest issues that you see business owners facing? How do you help them, or what should they be doing to try to overcome those issues?
Yeah, I think there's a few things. Most business owners don't take a long enough term view of things. They're looking at stuff like a month, 2 months at a time. Yeah. You've got to have that 5-year view plus, because the actions that you take today aren't going to have a consequence for 90 days. Yeah. So if you want to make a change in a year, you need to start now. Yeah. So I think most of them, it's the long-term view. And I would say that, like most of them, people are driven by fear. Yeah. There is so much fear for making changes. Yeah. That people just get stuck.
Yeah.
And they just go, well, what I'm doing kind of working. It's not terrible. It's not good, but it's not terrible. But if I was to do something different, it might be bad. And fear is just amazing at how it will just stop people.
Yeah.
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 So a lot of what we do is mindset around that stuff, and trying to understand what's your driver. Why are you driven by fear? And fear's a terrible driver. It's like money. Money's a terrible motivator. You know what I mean? So a lot of that mindset stuff is really understanding why you're doing this. Why are we here? Why you know, and where do you want to get to? And what are the things that you're afraid of in that process? And if we break those down and really get to the bottom of them, then actually that roadmap to success becomes a whole lot easier.
So it's a good answer. That's a really good answer. So if someone is afraid, for example, so if they want to be more than they are currently, and it's for the right reasons, but they're afraid, were you just always wired in a way where, because I think about stories like that, I am a one-man band and I have 32 staff 7 days later. Were you just always open to just massive radical change, or did you train that in yourself?
It's actually really funny.
Yeah.
Because ironically, that drive was driven by fear. So it's changed over time now, but early on in my journey, I never wanted to be poor. I grew up poor. I never, ever wanted to be that again. And that drove a lot of my decisions. It drove me to take those big leaps because I didn't want to be there.
Yeah.
And the fear of that was what was propelling me forward. And then I kind of learned that that's a really bad motivating factor, and you know, put other things in place. But yeah, look, I don't know. I always said I'd put some analysis around it, but I always went, what's the worst that can happen?
Yeah.
You know, and I've got a contract that's going to pay me to do this stuff. It's more than what it's going to cost me because I've done my numbers on what it's going to cost me.
Yeah.
So I should make X amount of money. And I approach property investment the same and go, you know, it's a risk analysis. And it's exactly the same with any growth thing. You look at what are we going to risk? What's our reward? Are we comfortable with that difference?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That makes heaps of sense. And so, and because obviously property is a decent chunk, and we talked about like the commercial thing and stuff like that before we started, and I really like the idea of we've got 3 years pretty much left on our lease, and thinking that long-term vision. I'm trying to get us ready so that in 3 years we buy rather than leasing next time round, and I've got a few cool ideas that I'm like, I want there to be like a gym in the garage for all the staff, and I've got all those, and you can't really do that in someone else's building and those sorts of things. How do you juggle essentially three things? So it's like quantity surveying, consulting, investing in property at the same time without anything sliding or... Yeah,
totally. Well, the good news is, like, the quantity surveying, I've got a great team of people. You know, I still do a lot of it, and I do a lot of expert witness quantity surveying, which is really interesting work. So go and represent clients in court. And then I've got a lot of guys that sort of do the technician-based stuff, and I'll do the client-facing stuff. So day to day, that kind of just looks after itself.
Yeah.
The consulting, I only take on a select number of clients. Yeah. So I make sure that I have the time to service those people really well. Yeah. In terms of the property, again, it's about being strategic. Yeah. So I have a really clear strategy with my property investing. I don't touch, and everyone's different. There's no right or wrong here. There's guys that do stuff completely different to me, and they're totally right as well. But I'm saying for me, my strategy is commercial, and it's small to mid-range commercial property. Yeah. And there's a bunch of thought behind this. One, you've always got a tenant for them. 2, you pay them off really quickly. 3, you can have more of them, so your risk is lower. So in terms of the commercial stuff, it's way better than residential in my view, because your tenant pays all your OPEX. They're in there for a lot longer. They deal with all the fit out. All these things mean it's less hands-on. So all my commercial stuff, I look at it maybe once every 3 years when it's time to get a new tenant. And then I got a great agent that I work with, and 6 months out, I just say to him, mate, start listing it. Yeah. And that's really all I need to do. Basic maintenance is bugger all, way less than a residential property. Yeah. And I buy stuff that's low maintenance. I'll buy stuff that's tilt slab and, easy to look after.
Yeah, nice. Okay.
Yeah.
And you were saying you're kind of doing a building every sort of 5 years? Or?
Yeah, so the goal is to, and what I've done is I buy something, and most of those commercial loans are 5 years.
Yeah.
You can roll them over, make them older and that sort of thing, but
Yeah.
but it's a good goal for me. So
Yeah.
buy it, work really hard, pay the thing off in 5 years, work in it myself for that period of time, and then once it's paid off, get a tenant in, buy the next one, move into that,
Yeah.
and then improve it over the next 5 years, pay it off, go on. So yeah, we've just done it again. We started fit out on a new one today.
Yeah, you're swinging a hammer this
Swinging
morning.
a hammer this morning. Yeah.
Nice.
So we'll be in there for 5 years, and
Yeah.
then it'll be time to get a tenant in and go again.
Yeah, nice. And then probably it hits a point where those buildings being freehold and there being a few of them could kind of almost pay one off. Just between them, you wouldn't even really need to worry about being a tenant in there, and it compounds, right?
Totally, it compounds. And the whole point with the commercial property really is it's part of that longer term strategy I was talking about before. So to stop work at 50, and let's just say that my number, everyone's number is different, but let's just say my number might be 150 grand a year that I need in income to live.
Yeah.
So I need my commercial property to return 150 grand. And if you've got enough of them, returning 30, 40 grand each, then piece of cake.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah. And that's all you need to do.
You make it sound very simple.
Well, it is. And funnily enough, one of my consulting clients, the sole purpose of our consulting together is for him to retire.
Yeah.
So
right.
he's a little bit older than me, so his runway is a little bit shorter. But he's like, Matt, I want to figure out a way of how do I get enough money so I can stop this working gig.
Yeah.
So our whole focus together, everything we do is about saying, how do we develop a recurring revenue stream for you so you can stop?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's what we're doing. And we're setting up things now, putting stuff in place now. He's actually just bought his first commercial.
Yeah.
It's one of the strings in his bow.
Yeah.
And we've got a tenant in it. It's starting to pay the mortgage down. That'll be off in 5 years. And in 10 years, he'll be ready to
Tell them.
step out.
Yeah, wow, how cool.
Yeah.
And how fun must it be having tail end of business journey, leaving guys like Mike that are bright-eyed, bushy-tailed right at the start, heading uphill as fast as they can, like getting to place so many different situations like that. It's cool.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I like most about what I do is different businesses, different clients, different goals, different objectives, all that sort of stuff is cool.
Yeah.
What were the most important lessons you learned from building and selling your first company? And then how did you roll? Like, I know we sort of touched on that, but like the things you did the most wrong is kind of what I'm interested in, because I think everyone's naturally wired in certain directions. You seem like you're really good numbers wise, for example.
So, yeah, totally. So definitely what I did wrong was I didn't have a solid foundation. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by solid foundation is I meant it was only something that I could replicate. So to give you an example, this is how crazy things were.
Yeah.
I'd work Monday to Thursday in Christchurch. I'd leave Christchurch at 5 o'clock. I'd drive to Blenheim, the back road, because Kaikoura was closed.
Yeah.
Get there at some ungodly hour. I'd sleep on my blow-up bed in the office. I'd get up. I'd work all day. Sleep in the office again. Come back to Christchurch. Work all week. And doing all this, what it meant was no other owner is going to come in and do that stuff.
Yeah.
So the numbers that I was producing, the turnover of jobs that we were able to do, I was doing the work of 3 people, so we were 3 salaries less. It wasn't a sustainable foundation. Mm-hmm. So the numbers looked amazing and the growth was looking great, but it couldn't be replicated.
Yeah.
So you can't sell that.
Yeah.
And so what I learned was you've really got to take the long-term view. And whatever you do, you need to set up so that it is sustainable and replicatable. And then you've got something that's saleable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a guy who I've known for years, Sam, on the podcast a few years ago, and he is probably the strongest embodiment of that I've ever seen. He's a videographer, and he'll shoot 7 properties during the day and then stay up until 3 in the morning editing the videos, and then shoot another 7 properties the next day and then do that. It's just in perpetuity with no strain. And it's one of those ones, I mean, I've worked deeply hard at periods through this business, but I I don't know if I've ever been like that for that period of time.
The sacrifice was just crazy. But what you just have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
So for the videographer, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. He can do that. So his focus needs to be on cash flow.
Mm-hmm.
His focus needs to be, I can work like this, so let's maximize the money in the door and let's do something cool with that money.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be able to sell this model, which is fine. Not everything has to be sold. Sometimes it's about just cash generation.
Yeah.
So use that skill, use that work ethic to generate cash and then do something cool with that cash. Yeah. But if it's views to sell, the structure's wrong.
Yeah. And because that's the point you just pointed out that is smartest is you can't just drop someone else in to replicate that because 90% of humans just couldn't, probably more, right? Maybe 99%. And so then when you change the business and you put 3 people in to manage his one person's workload, all the profits sucked out. Yeah. And so then, and that's where it becomes hard.
And it's all sorts of stuff, man. Like some of the mistakes I made early on, like around vehicles, for example. We had a huge fleet of vehicles.
Yeah.
So I went super cheap.
Yeah.
And I was getting like, $2,000 utes.
Yeah.
And on paper, everything looked good, but it wasn't sustainable.
Yeah.
And they'd only last one warrant, and then then they're toast. You know what I mean? And we're wasting all this time with breakdowns and time with selling off old ones and buying a new one every 6 months. And if I'd gone and spent 30 grand, it would have been sustainable and solid. And so all these lessons were just learnt. Yeah,
right. Yeah. And there's also a time in your business career though where like the $2,000 ute's the option.
Oh, 100%.
And
100%.
Like, the nostalgia I have towards, this room, for example, right? I never thought that my business would have a situation where I could go, I want to start a podcast and I could punt 20 grand at kit and go, let's have a real red hot crack at this. I believe in the mission and being able to turn this into a service and all these things. And so you get the lenses and the cameras, and sure, you can use them in other areas. And you can do it, but like that to me, 3 years ago, it was an unimaginable amount of money to spend on something like this. But back then, I would have got an iPhone that I already owned and a plug-in lapel mic, and I would have done the same
100%.
thing. And whether it's better or worse is up to the consumer. It's not up to you.
I think bootstrapping stuff. I'm a huge fan of bootstrapping.
Yeah.
And I'm a huge fan of bootstrapping until you've proved concept.
Yeah.
Right. So use your iPhone, use your $20 microphone, do a few, prove the concept, starts generating money. Yeah. Sweet, I'm investing.
Yeah.
But so many people and so many trades that I work with go, all right, I'm starting a plumbing business. What's the first thing I need? A $70,000 Ranger. Like, no, mate, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Go and get a 10 grand high ace.
Yeah.
And invest another 10 in advertising. And we'll worry about that later on once you've actually proven it and start made some money. And so there's time and a place for everything.
Yeah.
But I think, my mistake was continuing that bootstrapping long after it had run its course.
Yeah, right. And I mean, it's funny talking to you because I think that we're like, a lot of people have come in here and I've been like, I'm the same. I think we're opposites. Yeah. I think I'm the guy who was like, I want the 70 grand Ranger way before I was supposed to, and who overcommits to stuff way too early. And I'm kind of using, like we were talking today about extra roles that we've got to fill, for example. Old James, hire the people. Put the CCADs up, hire the people. New James, I'm in there and I'm like, do we have people that if we trained them properly and enabled them and clearly prioritize the tasks, we could soak up these responsibilities with? And we're sort of sitting there and we're like, probably. Yeah, and it's like, so maybe because everyone's usually just too far in one direction, and it's about getting as close to the middle as you can. I think with time, maybe I'm getting a little bit better at it.
And the other thing too, there's a huge amount to be said for sweat equity.
Yeah.
I really believe that. And Pete, Pete, and Pete and I we did a lot together in those early days.
Yeah.
And he was the same as me, driving massive Ks, working massive hours.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff. Like our office didn't have a shower. Yeah. So at the end of the day, we'd have to go down to the river.
Yeah.
And have a swim.
He told me this actually the other day, didn't he? Yeah.
Just crazy stuff. But at the time, you're doing what you have to do, and you're making $1 million a month.
Yeah.
So you're doing this stuff.
Yeah.
To get there.
Yeah.
And there's a huge amount to be said for sweat equity and the sacrifices that you have to make to get there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that I also just say to people. Business is hard, man. It's not meant to be easy. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be really hard until it's not.
Yeah. And I think signing up to the hard and rather than viewing it in real time as hard, but instead as like a part of the story, really takes away. Like
100%.
that is, how cool is it being able to tell that later? When you're jumping in the river, it's probably not that good.
Yeah.
But when you get to talk about it afterwards, people are like, he did what? And it's
Yeah.
like, that's something that will stick. That's who you are. It reflects you. It's
And
cool.
no one knows either.
Yeah.
Like, that's the funny thing.
Yeah.
Like, you might work all day and then go jump in the river and then put your blazer on and go to a client meeting and sign a contract.
Yeah.
And they don't know that you've just, like, gone through all of this to get to a point where you can actually sign that contract, but that's what you need to do.
Yeah.
It's
really cool. If someone, obviously being someone who's scaled businesses unreasonably fast in the past, if someone who is listening to this, they want to scale quickly, what is the number one piece of advice that you'd give them?
I don't think it's that easy. I don't think there's one thing, but there's probably two things. So the very first thing is you've got to commit.
Yeah.
So if you want to scale, no matter what, you've got to commit to it. Mm-hmm. And I mean all in. You're on this journey, you've got to commit.
Yeah. The
second thing is before you commit, you need to plan the shit out of it.
Yeah.
You need to have a roadmap. And I go on about this roadmap, but it's my thing that I do with the consulting, and I do it with all my clients. And it's a really simple, straight road. You're here today. Where do you want to be in 1 year, 3 year, 5 years? Write those things down. And then what are the tasks you need to do to get to those points? Mm-hmm. So to get from where we are today to your 1 year goal, these are the things you need to do. And if you plan it like that, then that's the first thing. You've got to plan it to make sure it's actually workable. Mm-hmm. Once you've got that plan in place, you've got to commit to it. Yeah. And if you can do those two things, man, you'll scale.
Yeah, right. That takes something that is extremely complicated and sums it up in a really simple way. So that's
And it is simple. Like those steps along the way can be complex. So it might be, in the first month we've got to find funding. Mm-hmm. That in itself might not be easy, but it's the task we need to do to get to that point. We've got to implement a marketing strategy. Yep. We've got to hire some staff. We've got to get some more vehicles. We've got to do this. We've got to do that. And these are the things we've got to do to get to where we want to be. Yeah. But unless you commit to those things, unless you commit to going to the bank or going to a mezzanine finance company and getting what you need, unless you commit to putting that marketing plan in place, you're not going to get where you want to go.
Yeah, right.
So you've got to have the plan, but more importantly, you've got to commit to doing the plan.
Yeah. And there's a lot to be said for, Pete actually is involved in it, but I've got this group, there's 4 of us, and we essentially set things that we've got to do, which we eye up as being our next step.
Nice.
And when we do them, we shout everyone dinner. And so it just gives us like this little positive feedback loop. And this podcast was mine. Pete's done, he's had a success with one. David's done one. I know you know David. Yeah. Brett, who's also been on the podcast, he's done one as well. And we've all gone through and checked these goals off. And they could be, like mine's a podcast. It's not tied to a bottom line number or something like that. But I'm like, I believe in our business being more of a media company than an agency as time goes on. And our brand and impression in the market is the thing that grows us from this point rather than our lead generation systems, which is what got us here. So this is a key piece of that. So I'm like, right, I need to launch it. That they give me the commit piece because I'm like, I go out for 3 dinners and they've all checked their thing off and I haven't checked mine off and everyone wants to go out for Bessie and I'm like, but rent the cameras, do the things. I'm booking 3 people and we're just starting, right? Like, and there's a lot to be said for that. And you mess everything up. Once you get there, you do it all wrong because you try to shoot 6 podcast episodes in 1 day so you can get ahead and your brain pops and it's all. But you start, and then you're 2 months later, and it's like, it's a lot more polished, and I get how this, because you've started that process. So nice. I agree, there's a lot to be said for making things move and using whatever you've got to kind of use to, like, whatever accountability, whatever.
Totally. And so long as you've got some sort of long-term strategic plan in place to make sure that what you're doing is actually on the right track, then it's just overcoming that fear, overcoming that complacency, and just committing to it.
Yeah, cool. That's awesome. What mindset or daily habits have been critical to your success Obviously, such a diverse range of industries, a bit of a construction theme, but such a diverse range of industries.
Yeah, look, probably three things.
Yeah.
So there's 24 hours in every day.
Yeah.
And I like to put them all to good use.
Yeah.
You know, you need 6 hours to sleep, but that leaves you a pretty good 18 hours to do some other stuff.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you sit there TikToking, you lose a bunch of productive time. So my mindset's always been there's 24 hours in this day. I'm going to use all of them.
Yeah.
That's one. Another big one is just don't put off to tomorrow what you can do today. If it needs doing, do it, because otherwise it's going to compound tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then the third one, which is just it's really big this year actually, is exercise.
Yeah.
Just
cool.
making an exercise a part of every single day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Reese, who owns Recreate Performance, was my guest yesterday, and we have
nice.
An internal health and wellness initiative we do with him, where we do 3 sessions a week at Recreate, like a staff thing, and it's real cool. So I've got a newborn. I don't know if I've spoken, but a 4-month-old at home, and exercise got bumped off my list for a period of maybe like 3 weeks or something like that. Not long ago, Jen was sick, and there's a whole bunch of other things going on. I didn't realize how bad I felt until I started exercising again, because it slowly pulls you down the hill. And then I went and did like 1 session, and I was like, why do I just feel so good? Like, it's not, I don't know what I feel, but it's good. And before wasn't good, and I didn't know, but like sleeping better, like talking better, thinking better, everything is better.
Yeah.
Is that a new thing for you? Or?
No, I've always been pretty athletic. My issue is I really struggle with exercise in moderation.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
So I and even just real coming up actually, I've done coast to coast, and I've done Ironman, and I've done a bunch of different endurance stuff. And this year I decided, right, I want to do an ultra marathon.
Yeah.
And not just any, but I want to do 100 miles.
Yeah.
So 160 Ks.
Yeah.
Which is actually next weekend. So I've got a week.
Wow.
I've got a week to go. So this year I've actually done sort of overdone the exercise piece.
Yeah.
With like big miles, big training. But yeah, look, I mean, an hour a day, 5 days a week, that's all you need to stay on an even keel.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't have to be silly and go and do what I'm doing.
And sometimes you can. I mean, I had this on Tuesday, I think it was this week. I took my program that would typically take 45 minutes, but I didn't have 45 minutes. So I was like, I'm just going to do all of the stuff as fast as I can. And I was out in 25 minutes, but I didn't compromise on volume. And I was just like, it's all good. And then just grabbed myself and went straight home because I had to make something back at home. And so I was like, I think sometimes being uncompromising on it as well. And
totally. And you know, like I made sure that I signed up to a 24-hour gym.
Yeah.
So if I need to go at midnight, I'll go at midnight.
Yeah.
If I need to go at 3 a.m., I'll go at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
But yeah, just being uncompromising on it, because it's just such a critical part of your well-being.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah. Cool. We've kind of covered off how we started in property investment pretty naturally. With the markets constantly shifting, how do you manage the risk that comes with property?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of data.
Yeah.
I do a lot of my decisions, well, all of my decisions, largely. I make very few emotional decisions. They're all based on data.
Mm-hmm.
And so I will look at all sorts of data sets before I invest in something.
Yeah.
So a few years ago, I actually got into investing in Timaru.
Yeah.
Bizarrely, it was post a hailstorm. We were doing a heap of insurance work down there.
Yeah.
And I was like, man, this place is quite nice. So I started doing some digging, and I figured out that like 80% of Timaru is paid by primary industry. So it's a really stable economy. Something like 60% of people in Timaru own their own houses. So there's a big turnover of residential property. And they follow the national curve in terms of property growth. But it's like half the price of Christchurch. So all these things say this is a really good place to invest.
Yeah.
And so we invested a bunch in Timaru, which was unusual because we don't normally go residential, but it made sense because the data said so. In terms of like commercial risk, obviously your standard stuff like your insurance policies, basic risk. But you know, I manage it through relationships. So before we sign a tenant up, I don't just go for the first person that we find. You know, we get the tenant to give us a CV, we go and meet with them, we Google them, we background check them, we make sure that they're a person we want to be in a relationship with for the next 5 years. And if you do that, you start minimising your risk. And then we minimise the risk in terms of the portfolio by saying we're going to have a bunch of smaller ones rather than one giant one. Yeah. Then if one tenant moves out, we've still got 6 other people paying us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Makes heaps of sense.
And just smart planning. Like 6 months before a tenant moves out, I'll start advertising it.
Yeah.
So I've got a new tenant signed up a month before the old one ends, so that, you know, we flow on and we don't have downtime, and just good management.
The theme that I'm getting, and I don't know if this is how you view yourself, but is thoughtful, educated. If you don't know, you'll go and learn. Structured, like there's a process that sits behind, and it's not just this. It's MK2, it's past businesses, it's the property, it's the workouts, it's the everything that allows all of this stuff to fit together, because it wouldn't without it.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And I think that's one of the big things that I bring to the table for the consulting clients.
Yeah.
Is saying to them, hey, look, any of this stuff's possible, but we've got to have structure around it.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's small as you want to hire your first staff member, that's cool, but let's put some structure around it.
Yeah.
Let's write a job description. Let's write a position description. Let's do the salary stuff. Where are we going to advertise? Let's put some thought into it. Is this a Seek job? Is this a Trade Me job? Is this an agency job? Like, you know, thought into all that stuff will lead to success.
Yeah, right. Cool. I've got a question that I usually ask at this point that's actually not written on here, but it's one of my favourites of the whole podcast. So bear with me. It's one that probably deserves forethought, so maybe I'll chuck it in for future planning ones. But if you were to go back to the start, so you go back all the way to pre-university, all the way, and you could give yourself one piece of advice that would help to impact everything moving forwards from that point, what would that one piece of advice be?
I think it would be consistency. I think it would be, if I had all that time again, I think I would start one really good thing based on good data, and I would grow the shit out of it over a long period of time to the point that it generated a bunch of income. So I think a lot of what I went into early on was just around, I enjoy doing this, or I'm good at doing this. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a good business. So, like, to give you an example, I've got a friend that is in property management, and he created a property management company in Auckland from scratch. Grew it to like 800 houses on his book or something. And that business, it's not glamorous. You're dealing with tenants, it's horrible. But the cash that thing generates, unbelievable. And he doesn't have to be involved.
Yeah.
He can have property managers doing it all. And it's worth a large amount of money.
Recurring revenue, contracts.
Recurring revenue. No physical assets.
Yeah.
Low overheads. Huge recurring revenue.
Yeah.
Leveraging other people's assets.
Yeah, and he's not involved at all.
And he's not involved at all.
Yeah.
Like, ridiculous business model. So I think I'd put a lot more thought into what industry I would get involved in. And I'd make sure that the data on that industry was sound.
Yeah.
And it would mean that I wouldn't have to be in it forever.
Yeah.
I could scale it really quickly. I wouldn't need huge amounts of capital to do it. It'd be worth something very quickly.
Yeah.
All of those things. And I think stick with it, because whilst, you know, building something, selling it is great, and you're generating lumps of cash you can do something with, you then have to start again.
Yeah.
And no matter how much critical mass you had on your last one, you're still starting again. So even with MK2, like, you know, I got out of Cube, I still had all my contacts. I still had everything behind me, but it took 18 months to build something from the ground up again. So you lose all that time. And during that time, your income's not what it used to be before. So I think, doing it all again, probably just one thing, stick to it, and scale the hell out of it.
Yeah, nice, interesting. What's next for you in terms of business, property, all those sorts of things?
Yeah, so it's been a really interesting year. So normally, most years, we have something big happen, whether that's an event or a sale or, something. And this year, like 24, it's just been pretty cruisy. Like it's just been business as usual. Nothing massive happening. Really sustainable, and it's been quite nice. So I've got a 5-year succession plan, and this year was year one of that. So next year is going to be about continuing that succession plan with the view to being out in 5 years' time. Next year probably get another building. I'd say, I'd like to have another one in the fleet for next year.
And so that time you won't move into that, or you will move into it a year after?
I'm not sure. It'll depend on what we get. Like if we get something that's quite nice, we'll just rent it. If we get something that's a bit of a dunger, I might just hang on to it and do some work on it. And
Cool. Hey, this has been epic. This has been really cool. We've got a 20 questions one to shoot after this, which I think we'll have a heap of fun with, because it'll help pull a whole bunch of diverse pieces of information out of your head. For this wrapping up, what will be the second podcast that's released, and let's say someone's listened to the first 20 questions one and now this full-length one, they've heard your story, they want to talk to you about quantity surveying, they've got a building for sale, they want to chat about business consulting, they want to keep up with what you're doing. How do they learn more about you? Where should they find you?
Yeah, cool. So we're online, just mk2consulting.co.nz, MK2 Consulting Facebook. And if anyone wants to contact me directly, just matt@mk2consulting.co.nz.
Cool, nice. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up? Or?
No, thank you. It's been awesome.
Yeah,
I generally sort of keep a pretty low profile with all this stuff, and it's really good to come out and get a bit of it out there.
Yeah, mate, it's been like I said, I had high hopes. Like it was not one of those. I was really excited for this one. This has superseded them massively. Your story is awesome. People will take a heap away from it. The way that you can tell how intelligent someone is based on the way they describe complicated things. That's a big thing I believe in. And if someone can break down something that is complicated and explain it like they're talking to a toddler, it shows how capable they are. And you did an exceptional job of that. So I really appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you.
Hey, if you've made it this far, thank you very much for listening. We're going to shoot this 20 questions episode after this. It'll be released before. I'm really excited for that. Get in touch with Matt if you have any questions or anything you do with him. Make sure that you subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening, you want to watch this, you can do so on YouTube. And I will see you on the next one. Thanks again.